knew she heard him when he tripped over that stupid faux antique table in the hall. And when the telephone followed him to the floor, she was already at the top of the stairs. Drunk again? A practiced sigh hissed from her thin lips. He staggered up on his knees and tried to put the phone back on the table. She watched a faint sneer curling its way down the staircase. She was in her hideous baby doll nightie, which was for someone half her size. But she insisted she wanted it, and it made her look cute. And then she lifted her night dress, her fat, bulging thighs gleaming in the moonlight. If you're very good, I'll buy you all the drink you need. She laughed at the same old joke. He ran up the stairs, every ounce of energy, of his remaining energy, concentrated on her, but nearly at the top he slipped and fell, counting every step with his chin. The table lay in ruins about her, a worthy sacrifice. Typical, she said. Now you know why I don't buy good furniture. He struggled to his feet, but she was gone. For one mad moment, he thought he'd imagined her. Something gave in the banisters with a loud crack as he lurched up the stairs. She was in bed, lying on her back, one hand dangling down over the side. The dim bedside light was on. Was she trying to tell him something? By the table was a vodka bottle, half empty by the looks of it, and a fallen over tumbler. He touched her. Maybe this time she'd want him. A grunting snore was her excited response. He lay beside her, his hand on her thigh like a drowning man who had never made it to the other shore. He fell beside her. He remembered his heart beating very fast, and his body felt hot, a dry heat he imagined old men have when they're about to die. His hand lay where she'd been. When he opened his eyes, he thought he'd gone blind, until he realized that the room was very dark. She was shuffling about, a wheezing shadow. He turned over and dozed. Strange dreams came to him. She was screaming, beating him with her fists as he lay there enjoying it. The dream changed to massage parlor, where he lost himself in some erotic pleasure that the world had yet to discover. What's wrong with you? He heard her say, and felt her hand pressing over his mouth. He shoved her away as he gasped for air. What the hell do you think you're playing at? Playing at? That's a laugh. You should have heard yourself moaning and choking as if your little life was about to end. Nice nightmare, was it? I couldn't breathe. He wasn't sure he should tell her, but he continued. It wouldn't matter to her anyway. I was paralyzed like someone put a heavy weight on my chest. I've never had a dream like that before. He smiled. Perhaps I had too much to drink. We all know why you drink too much, but you can't hide from your dreams. She looked at him as if expecting a response. I don't understand. You know exactly what I'm talking about, she said, looking over at the cot in the shadow of the far corner. He shuddered, wishing his whole life could be a dream in a massage parlor being pummeled by soft cushioned blows, and not that other dream. He stared at the cot. What if there were no baby? Would she be different? Yes, you know, she repeated as she sat down in bed and straightened her nightdress as best as she could. As usual, I have to feed it, she sighed, and swung her legs over the side of the bed. The red light of the bottle warmer flickered evenly. Maybe it would short-circuit and kill her. Do we have to go through all this? He felt sick as he watched her walk to the corner, humming to herself. I think it's sleeping, she whispered as she leant over the cot. Yes, it is. I must pull the blanket up, or else the poor little thing will perish. He watched her with disgust. She talked to the baby. Stupid baby talk. Come to bed. In a moment, she said. She kissed the baby, loud enough for him to hear, and then tiptoed back to bed. He didn't know why, but he stretched out his arm to touch her. Don't, you'll wake the baby. He opened his eyes when he heard Sardi's letters thud on the hall floor. A strange depression had settled over him, forcing some part of him to be motionless, numb, oblivious to anything. The more he tried to remember, the more he wanted to forget. He was frightened. The dream had gone bad, worse than any nightmare. He could hear her downstairs, picking up the letters. Most of them would be for her. He looked at the heavy black curtains so tightly drawn that they might have been sewn together. In the unnatural gloom, he could barely see the cot. He got out of bed, scratching himself, and went over to the curtains. "Don't open them!" She was behind him, standing in the doorway, her mouth quivering. "What's wrong now?" he shouted. "Don't open them." She was quiet now. "You'll wake the baby." He laughed. "Why don't you wake the baby?" He watched tears fill her eyes and felt a luscious thrill go through him. She stopped crying, her face a mask of sly hatred. "Yeah, why don't I? And see who is going to have to answer a lot of awkward questions." He stared at her, not knowing what to say. "Well, who's going to do all the answering, me or?" She made a gesture with her hand. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was drunk. It's not my fault." She sat down on the bed and motioned him to do the same. "Yes, we were both drunk," she said. She seemed a little sad. "But it was fortunate one of us was sober enough to know what was going on." Her face twisted with the effort of shouting. He looked at her, shocked, not knowing what to do. "Were you too late?" he said. Somehow this seemed the right thing to say. Yes, yes, she held her head in her hands. "But it's my fault. I shouldn't have let you." He shifted on the bed. She could have been a prostitute that he'd just picked up for all he knew about her. She was a stranger, and he was walking through a maze where time had no meaning. One false move, and the whole thing would explode. "Well, you were supposed to take precautions, weren't you?" he said. "What?" She looked at him, puzzled. "Oh, I see." She stood up and gazed at the far corner. "You?" And she began to laugh. "I didn't think I'd need protection with you." He felt cold, a pressure inside him making him feel breathless, as if some truth he'd always known had been revealed. And he slapped her, feeling it more than hearing it. "That won't change anything." She talked to him as if he was someone else's child that had just thrown a tantrum. "That brat, that thing," he heard himself stutter. "How dare you bring it into my house?" "It's yours too, sweetie," she said, smiling. "One of the few things you managed to complete in your rotten life. And that's all you did. And you'd think you'd be thrilled to bits? Oh no, I'm the one that has to feed and clean it. And what do? Sit and moan how expensive it is to keep it, as if it's a bloody cow." "Oh no," he said, "you're not going to try that. It won't wash. Just won't wash. Because you quite rightly say, I can't get it up. Now, what excuse do you have for that brat over there who eats all my money?" "No, it's yours." She coughed and not bothering to cover her mouth. "I know you never liked it, but I thought at least you would pretend to, especially after what has happened." He looked over at the cot. "Nothing has happened. Nothing," he said more to himself than her. She told him she'd drunk the rest of the vodka, and could he please get her more before the off-license closed for the night. No, she was quite sober. Yes, he could get drunk for all she cared. After all, what was it to her? He was right, nothing had happened. They had just imagined the whole thing. He needn't worry, she was on his side. His child was sleeping while they were pretending to have a marriage. But he was all right. She understood. When he got back, she calmed down and was looking glassy-eyed at the television. "Just got there in time," he said, forcing a smile. "They were about to close." "Lucky you." She didn't even turn around. "My glass is on the sideboard." He poured her a large vodka and added some ice. No, I'll have it neat, she said before he could make the drink more respectable. Aren't you having one? She said, her eyes still on the screen. It was only then he noticed that the sound was turned off. No, not after last night, he laughed a little too loud. I thought we had a promise, she said. Sorry? Well then? What? Drink, damn it. She flung out her arm. Drink and forget. As if he hesitated, feeling this had gone far enough. His hands shook, and for one moment he was afraid he might spill the vodka on the sideboard, her sideboard. Soon the bottle was finished, but he bought just another one just in case. He drank with her, or rather for her, he told himself. Soon he felt the alcohol poised, ready to engulf him. It was too late. It was always too late. He would fight it, but he knew he would lose. Surrender was the only way he knew. And then, if he was lucky, oblivion. She hardly spoke to him and laughed the way drunk people laugh from time to time. People talking on a silent screen seemed to amuse her. He put his hand up her skirt, and with equal detachment she brushed it aside. He was as much nuisance as a fly. Suddenly she was on her feet, staggering a little. I'm going upstairs, she gave him a twisted grin. And that's not an invitation. She picked up the bottle, changed her mind, and put it down with a heavy thud. Have a drink on poor little old me. In fact, have as many drinks as you bloody well like, it'll help, she smirked. He stood in the open doorway. She was already in bed, asleep, snoring gently. She lay there, crumpled, the sheets around her. The room was beginning to spin. Damn her and her bastard child. He hadn't wanted to drink, but she left the bottle there, and that was that. It was all her fault. He collapsed onto the bed, too drunk to undress, and closed his eyes. He was falling backwards, spinning faster and faster. Don't wake the baby, he heard her say. He wanted to go over and see, but the bed trapped him. He couldn't move. The terror was real. So real, he must wake up. He tried to open his eyes, but something was pressed so hard over his face that he couldn't breathe, and he heard her muffled voice, her laughter. Go to sleep, darling. Go to sleep. Colin is sleeping, and now you too must sleep.